Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today, we are speaking with Natalie. She is first and foremost a human being, quickly followed by a mom to 3 boys through adoption and birth. She's a professional branding photographer, an author, and a podcaster. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and she loves Cabernet. She can eat her weight in nachos, and in all she does, she hopes to create a safe space for everyone to show up exactly as they are. It's what I really love about her, without shame. And at the end of the day, that's all that she hopes for too. Thank you so much for joining us, Natalie. I really appreciate your being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this. I was brought to the attention of your Instagram account by a friend after you had written your book, and started following you. And honestly, I just love everything about what you're doing right now.
Thank you. It feels vulnerable, empowering, and important.
Yeah, you have a voice, and we all do, but not everyone uses it. And I think you use it in a way that is authentic, but you also you try to just tell your own story, not to tell anyone else what to do. And I love that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always like to start at the beginning. Would you tell us a bit about your childhood?
Yes, as a brief overview, I grew up with 2 older siblings who are, and then also a younger sibling. Technically, we are half siblings. My older 2 siblings are my half biological. We have different dads, but we all have the same mom. But we never really paid attention to that, or like, it's just so interesting because not until adulthood did that become a thing, when I became a mom and people were asking me about my kids' like blood relation, and I'm like, does that even matter? Anyways,
Uh-huh.
so, and it doesn't matter, by the way. But yeah, so I grew up with my 3 siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, on a farm. We had a 1-acre farm with animals. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until I was in 5th grade, and since then she's been a amazing realtor. My dad has, been a, what do they call, blue collar worker. He drives a garbage truck since I was born. My mom took us kids to church, very traditional church. We grew up in a very small town of 3,000 people. My graduating class had like 67 people.
Wow.
I know. And our church, so everybody knew each other. There's pretty much one church in town, and it was like the domination. Like, that is the church. If there's any other church, like, they're small. It's like this weird thing, but I don't know. It's weird looking back, but yeah, my parents, I would not say they had a healthy marriage by any standpoint. I think many of us could say that. We're all kind of waking up to that, I feel like, as adults. But
Yeah.
they did end up splitting up and divorcing as when I was in high school, into college. So, but growing up, we did a lot of camping. We did hunting. I used to hunt for animals, like with a rifle.
Really?
I know. I did like sports. Yeah. So
Wait,
really
can I just ask, did you enjoy did you enjoy that? The hunting?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like yes and no. Me and my sister both went with my dad quite often hunting for bears, elk, deer,
Wow.
pheasants, and then we also did a lot of fishing. And was kind of the only real time we spent like bonding with my dad. So it's definitely his thing. And it was the meat that we ate. We never ate store-bought meat. He would
Right,
be
right.
ashamed if he knew I only eat store-bought meat now. But
No,
yeah,
I'm
so
sorry to digress, but
yeah.
I've never really known anyone personally who did hunt, so I had to ask if you enjoyed it. But I do think venison is delicious, and I get, living off of the land and all of that. But it's nice that that was a bonding time for you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, he's not, he's like many of our dads, I would say. I mean, maybe not, but in the fact that he had his own trauma, he really fell into gender roles, still does,
Hmm.
of, men don't have emotions. And I am such an
Hmm.
I'm a very, like, I operate from my heart
Yeah.
mixed up with my mind. And so we didn't really connect, but, he probably felt like we were very connected.
Well, it sounds like you had a really diverse childhood. You had a lot of really wonderful things built in. And yes, you also had some trauma and some difficulties. And I think we all have dysfunction. We just don't realize it at the time. It's when we're
Yeah.
looking back or we're trying to figure out what's going on that we realize, oh, wait a minute, what was going on? Um, Let me ask, you were telling me about how small the town is and how
Mm.
you went to kind of the church. What was your church experience like growing up?
Yeah, I loved going to church. Church was also, I will say this is another part of it, is there was one public school and I was actually a part of a homeschool co-op. So I until sixth grade,
Mhm.
fifth grade. And so my elementary years, like there's only 12 kids in the whole school is in a garage. And so
Wow.
my right. And like so outside of those 12 kids who are K through 12, so
Right.
not very many kids my age,
Right.
um, my friendships really came from sports. And most of the people that I had friends with from sports were the same people that I had like Sunday school with at church. So
Mhm.
church was a really big deal. I loved church. I loved Sunday morning. I loved Sunday school. I did youth group all throughout high school. I ended up serving as well. Me and my former husband were youth pastors. So church was
Right.
very important part. I did like VBS. We did
Right.
church camp every summer. So I absolutely was formed very much through the culture of Christianity, non-denominational,
Yeah.
evangelical church. And I mean, looking back, there's a lot that I have had to unpack
Hmm.
from those years.
Yeah.
But I absolutely like growing up when I was in it very much. It felt really safe there. To be honest, as many people maybe, but I don't know. For me personally, I honestly hated being home. I
Yeah.
did not like my parents. I did not like my mom. For my experience growing up, I felt like my mom put on a show at church that we were this like good family, but then at home there's just like chaos and yelling and too much
Yeah.
drinking and
Yeah.
fighting, and it's very like confusing. So I loved church. Church was definitely my sanctuary.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I had a bit of that, we had the Norman Rockwell family look when we
Hmm.
went certain places and, and then we'd be home and I kind of look around like, wait a minute, I don't understand. Putting a dress with a bow on and doing my hair doesn't really, that doesn't really fix everything. But it is very confusing. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that you had that place as a refuge. But when we were talking in our pre-recording interview, you had said that as you look back, that the church that you went to ended up saddling you with a lot of traditions. And I wanted to know,
Hmm.
how do you think that all those rules and regulations portrayed you as you began to build your life?
Yeah. I have always been somebody that I really want to. So I don't know if you know much about the Enneagram. I'm an Enneagram 4.
I
And
do.
Enneagram, okay, I love it. I
Yeah.
love the Enneagram.
Yeah, it's
But it's
awesome.
helped me like really understand why I operate the way that I do. So since I was
Mhm.
young, I have had this like hidden, I don't want to say dark, because when we're talking about religion, that can come off very not what as I mean it. I've had this heavy hidden emotional pain part of me that has had to sort of be hidden away. And I have wanted to, it kind of has felt like a shadow, like a curse. I always thought I was cursed. Like, why do I feel so dark and heavy inside? When like everybody else doesn't seem to battle with this, you know? And so when we're talking about, I still believe that God's heart and intention and the way that he had like intended for humans to live is like the pain-free, beautiful, most fulfilling free way, right? And so I believed, you know, in church, and I was told and taught, if I do all these practices, if I go to church, if I study the Bible, if I you know, like really become a Proverbs 31 woman, if I like really do like live righteously, it's not a promise. I'd never thought it was a promise of no suffering. I just sort of really took on this idea that like it would be better. I don't know, like if I followed the rules and did what I was supposed to do in regards to dating, in regards to sex, in regards to having kids and building my family and my job that I do, that I will at least have the least amount of pain as possible on earth. And I also did know, and I've always clung to the reality in my personal experience, that Emmanuel, like God is with me. So even when those things do come up, I do have his presence with me. So I never bought into like there's no suffering. I just really feel betrayed in the fact that I actually did follow. I really did a good job of living the beautiful Christian Proverbs 31 woman. And I did not date to F around. I dated to marry, and that happened very quickly and ended, you know, and anyways, and our divorce was not this, what I had assumed divorces were, of like explosive, like hatred, you guys should not be together. It was confusing because we got along and we're a good team. But the way I was betrayed, I feel, is that we weren't given tools to actually like consider who we are as the person God made us. We were kind of placed in these boxes, and if we follow these rules and live our life within these boxes, then it will be fine. Like as long as my husband is a Christian and we both check off that box and we truly love God, like it's fine. But there's actually a lot of diversity in our personalities and the way we connect and operate and how mentally healthy we are and all these things.
Absolutely. I feel like it's like this equation, like this geometric equation, and you're X and you're Y, and that's not how it works. God made every single person unique. And then, like you said, we have this background we grew up with and these things that happen in our families and this baggage that we're carrying. And so all of that doesn't fit in that equation.
Right. No. And that sort of, I would say, is the main way I have felt betrayed by the Christian culture, is this idea that I guess just really viewing people as not as complex and unique as we truly each are, and not catering and like teaching us how to actually, you know, we were taught like you just said, the equations. We were taught the equations, but we were never taught how to sit. I mean, yes, like we were encouraged to sit personally with God, but it was still within these confines and these boxes.
Yes.
It was never truly like dissecting, who actually am I that God actually did create in his image, and it actually does look very different from
That's right.
And so anyways, I
didn't accept
those tools.
I didn't accept Jesus at church. I went to church growing up, and then I walked away from church for a really long time because I never really had met Jesus there. And then when I did meet Jesus, it was in my home. It had nothing to do with church. And he kind of sat with me and helped me begin to look at who I really was and what was meant for me, and to bust out of that equation. And I really, you know, as far as I saw things, I had completely messed up and there was no hope for me. And I found out that that's not true, that there's all the hope in the world for me. One of my
Yeah.
favorite scriptures is in Hosea 2:15, and he says, "I will make the valley of Achor," and that means trouble, a door of hope for you. And in that particular scripture, it's called Achor because Achan and his family were stoned there because they did something they weren't supposed to do. And so for me, it's even like, you know, I'm going to even take the place where you're serving out the repercussions for what you did, and I'm going to make a doorway of hope there. You know who that doorway is? Jesus. I'm going to meet you there, and I'm going to give you back everything.
Yeah.
And so for me, you know, all the stuff that I missed out on because I didn't understand that he was there for me. He met me finally in a place, and I walked through, and I've never been the same.
Yeah. Because he is with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had told me this one I still really can't believe. You told me during our pre-recording call that when you first met your husband's parents and y'all were talking, they said, and this is quoted, divorce is not an option, but murder is. I mean, whoa, like how can you unpack that for us? Like number one, how did it make you feel? Number two, what did they mean? Like, what did they mean?
They meant the words. They meant those words.
Okay.
I hope they never listen to this. But, I mean, whatever. Actually, please do listen to this because this is some damage. Here's the thing. They're not the only people that have said that. I have had a number of people, because I shared that on Instagram one time, and it's actually the opening line of my second memoir. Because it's really intense, and it's honestly like a real thing that a lot of Christians truly like say, and they really do believe it. Like, it's very interesting. So when I remember exactly, like, Dad was wearing a plaid shirt, I was sitting at the bar, like the breakfast bar. I had just met them. I had only been dating him for like a month, and we were dating long distance.
The opening line. You just met him? Oh my gosh.
Yes,
okay.
Like, it was the afternoon, within the first hour of being there, before the meal was even ready to eat. And, you know, I remember him looking at me and saying, you know, Natalie. And I was like, you know, and listen, my ex-husband was like in Bible school at the time to be a pastor in his senior year. I was working at a church. Like, we were very much entrenched in the ministry. And that's not a bad thing. It's just where we were. And he said, I just want you to know, you know, in this family, divorce is never an option, but murder is. And then they all chuckled. And I was like, haha, like, I was like, yes, of course. Like, that was literally my thought, was, of course, I would never get divorced. My parents have been divorced. I come from a long line of divorce on my mother's side. Everybody's divorced. And I was going to be the one to stop that. You know, which I do believe it does end with me because of the way that I have unpacked. Like, why are all of us divorced? I'm believing that we will raise healthier, you know, adults, but I'm hoping and believing, Lord Jesus. But that definitely, that was said, and that was also like, I agreed. And since then, I have unpacked that a little bit of like, that's actually how many Christians treat and view divorce, is that it is worse than murder. Like,
well, as somebody else who's divorced, I know it depends on who you talk to, how you are treated, and there are biblical reasons for divorce, though. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And God wants us to be mentally healthy. You know, that is his desire, is for us to be well. His desire is for marriage to be healthy. And when it's not, there's divorce. And I didn't enter into marriage wanting a divorce either. No one does. You wouldn't get married. Why would you bother? So but I do think it's interesting that sometimes people want to say this sin's worse than that sin, and this thing is worse than that thing. And honestly, we all sin every day, and we all need Jesus. That's what we have in common. And nothing's worse than anything else. And I do love what you said, though, about being the one to kind of stand in the gap and break this generational curse, because literally, you know, the Bible says that we're a priest, and we can be a priest in our family, and we can make the change through what's happening, and do it in a healthy way, and so that your sons can grow up knowing how to have a healthy marriage. And so what you've been through can really be the foundation, because that's what you're doing. You're doing it intentionally. It could be the foundation of beautiful, healthy marriages and generations going down from their lines of people who are married well.
Lord
And that's
Jesus, that
beautiful.
is my prayer. That is certainly my prayer.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I also wanted to say real quick, going back briefly into what you were saying, is you mentioned, there's biblical reasons for divorce, and that was one of the things that like early on, like when I was considering, like, wait a second, am I allowed? Because there was not physical affairs, there was not he was not punching me in the face, and I think that's a lot of rub that a lot of Christians face. And I have really dug into this a lot in the last 3 years. And I firmly believe that the marriage that Jesus Christ and the church model, or are supposed to model, and like the heart of God and the intention of marriage, is this sacred, beautiful picture. And like mental and emotional abuse or neglect is a form of that is going against your vow. Like when you're vowing to marry someone, that you are vowing to step into that space of serving and dying for them over and over. And that does not include mentally, emotionally neglecting and harming, or sexual abuse. That's also very like nuanced and people get confused about. And so I would argue that there are a lot more, like the idea of biblical divorce or the permissions in the Bible. I think that it's a lot more complex and bigger than what we have been taught.
I agree. I think there's platitude there. Definitely. Yeah.
And also, even if, like, let's just say, I don't know a single person that gets married and then decides to get a divorce for no reason.
Right.
I know nobody. But even if that is the case, like, God is still with you and not here to condemn you. Like, God is still like, all right, well, let's walk through this sin and brokenness too, anyways, that's just, sorry.
No, absolutely. I mean, the Bible is filled with people who make choices that are wrong. God doesn't lead them.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yes, we are human. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't leave David because David decides, oh, I'm going to go on the roof and check out Bathsheba, and now I'm going to have her husband killed, and now I'm going to, he does have repercussions, but he doesn't ever get left, and God continues to be faithful with his promises to him.
Yes.
God's character,
yes,
doesn't change. We're the ones that changed, and it's, what you were saying before, like, I think people think that, I don't know. I think people think sin is different. And I think that's one of the reasons why Jesus said, like, you can just think about a woman improperly, and that's adultery. You can just be angry in your mind about someone, and that can be considered murder. It is about our emotions. It is, like you said, there's platitude. There's this big, broad, just like we don't fit in the equations, perfectly. Well, also neither does every situation fit so perfectly. There's room for many things to be biblical divorce, I believe. And I think that the people that see it in such a, I don't even know how to say it, but see it in such a structured, strict, very narrow way, have a lot of trouble not judging people when they do seek divorce. And it's a shame. It's caused a lot of problems within the body of Christ.
Absolutely. And when we hold ourselves to a certain permission or standard, and when we don't allow ourselves honestly the freedom or the release to kind of explore, like, God is big enough for us to explore his heart and his word and like the nuances, but if we can't allow ourselves to do that, then wow, how dare somebody else try to do that, and so
Now, I think, and do you feel that you were both severely affected by purity culture?
100%. I think we were both groomed for like the abusive, dysfunctional marriage that we had.
Yeah, because that's some of what you described sounded like those were the types of things that you're hearing. Now, would you tell us, I mean, I was bowled over when you told me this, would you tell us what your premarital counseling was like? What were some of the things that they told you were your quote unquote job as a wife?
Yeah, we went through a book, and I was, again, all in. I was all in. I was here for this. I really, really bought into literally everything about purity culture. I was like preaching it. I was all in. So, you know, in premarital counseling, one of the conversations that came up, of course, regarding sex was that as a woman, it is definitely my job and responsibility to, you know, meet my husband's all of his sexual needs and desires. And I remember the pastor's wife telling me that after I have a baby, I'm not going to want to have sex, but I have to make it work anyways, one way or another for my husband, because that's not fair to him. Sorry, it's like laughable now. I'm like, I really was like, okay, I'm gonna prepare, you know, like.
And how old were you at this time?
I was a virgin and I was 19 at that time.
Wow.
And I, lived my whole life shutting any sexual pleasures down, telling my body and my soul like how shameful sex is, right? Like my body stored these messages. Still to this day, I'm trying to release these from my physical body. Body stores trauma. And that turned into trauma, and that set both of us up, because not only did that speak to me that inherently, and I didn't really hear it this way, but it is what I lived out, is that my body is not mine at all, even if I have literally no desire. I'm exhausted from having a newborn and I'm nursing, and I literally had either surgery from a cesarean or vaginally delivered a child. Like I still have to somehow be sexy and beautiful, and not beautiful physically, but like into like meeting my husband's needs. Like he doesn't need any sort of and so I was told this, but then so was he. So like he also was told like, this is your right, this is your entitlement, like this is what you can expect. And so if I didn't do that, then I'm being selfish, and I'm not laying my life down like Jesus lays. I'm the one not laying my life down. Never were we told, man, like to the husband, it's your job to, check in on your wife emotionally or mentally and help her carry the mental load of the household. Like that's never the conversation. It was never. Wow. I will also tell you, Amanda, I was thinking about this the other day before a therapy session I did. And I was just like, wow, that really happened. I was, I think, 15 years old. And a part of a church. I've been a part of a number of churches. It's not a church by church situation. It's an overall like American evangelical unhealth problem. So I was at a church and I had a crush on this boy who was 18. I was 15. And we had kissed. And it was my fault that we had kissed, of course. I mean, of course, but that's what it was. And I was invited to come to the prayer shack. So I went and met the pastor's wife at the prayer shack. And had to repent. Yes, it was literally a shack for praying. And I had to repent for, acting on my sexual desires. And then they continued, but my mom was present and I hated my mom at the time. And this whole thing was so traumatizing. She then begins praying and like pounding on my back to release the demons from me for acting on my sexual desire. And I'm coughing, but actually now I know enough about myself. I struggle with anxiety severely and at times depression. And I was having a panic attack. Yeah. And I am coughing and sobbing so hard and I can't breathe. My eyes, all around my eyes, I had all these little red dots from bursting blood vessels from coughing so hard. And she was saying to me, that is the demon. You're coughing the demon out of sexual sin.
Now, what happened to the 18-year-old?
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know if he ever got to talk. That's a great question. I remember his name. I mean, but just thinking back to that, I was like, wow, that is like spiritual abuse right there. And I'm not the only one.
That's several kinds of abuse right there. Wow. That
Yeah.
touches on everything. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that happened to you.
And
Wow.
the thing is I'm not there were a number of youth in that church. I'm not the only one, and that's not the only church, these
Yeah.
things are not isolated only about me. This is how toxic we can become in our rules and
Yeah.
our
I mean,
boxes.
certainly there's no example of this in the Bible. And, instead Jesus says, hey, you know what? When they were going to stone the woman who was the harlot,
Yeah.
first one of you without sin cast the first stone. Never, ever. Oh, okay. We have to move on
but
because
they took
I'm
it
getting.
on. Okay.
I
All right.
have this mama thing in me that just wants
Yeah.
to throat punch people. Sometimes it's not very Christian, but oh my gosh, that's horrible. I'm so sorry.
Jesus did flip the tables.
He did flip the tables. That is very different from. Okay, but he was righteously angry about something because people were doing things like that within what he meant to be a safe and holy place for the body of Christ. They were doing things that he never asked them to do.
But
wow.
We really believed, me including, that they were truly,
Yeah.
healing me by casting out.
I'm
that's
sure
how twisted it can get. Is we can really twist this up when we think we're in charge of doing this stuff for other people.
Yeah, and when generations are telling the next generation something, they need to be careful to tell them the truth. Wow. So I'm going to move on from a couple other questions because I'm still amazed by that. You hadn't shared that with me before, but I'm glad that you did because that's just a lot. You had told me that you thought that you were broken and that things not going as you had expected them to was somehow your fault. And I can see, based on some of these things, how that came to be, even though it wasn't true. And then you talked with a friend. You guys co-parent very well together. You're still in each other's lives. You're able to have some sort of relationship because you're not confined by the marriage that caused all this trauma.
Yes.
That sounds like healing to me. That sounds like healing.
Redemption, honestly, reconciliation in the way that people don't want it to be, but it is that we have had a level of reconciliation and redemption from that harm.
Yes, so that's healing. It's just different than what we all would love for the person to not have cancer and the person to suddenly be able to see and for the marriage to be completely healed. I've talked to so many people, one person in particular who talked about narcissistic abuse in the marriage, and basically the therapist was like, no, it's not gonna, you need to go now, leave. So there's certain situations where it's not healthy to stay there.
Absolutely. And to this day, there are a number of times when I'm like, okay, there's a reason we are still not married, because we still live in totally separate emotional existences where it's just totally I have a friend who is a marriage and family therapist who met us 4 years into our marriage, and after we split, he was like, I had no idea how in the world anybody allowed you guys to get married. He was like, you guys do not fit together. He was like, absolutely not. And he loves God, he loves Jesus. And he was like, you guys are going to do a lot better not married. I was like, that's so funny. Validating. Anyway.
Now, would you tell us a bit more about Sage and Ira and explain a little bit? You had mentioned having 5 kids at the time you told him, but you guys were fostering, just so that people have an understanding. So you have Sage and Ira. You always had a heart for both biological and adopted and foster children. And that kind of played out in your life. What was that season like for you? You had Sage and Ira. How did that come to be?
So in the shortest snippet, we were pursuing infant adoption while also open to birth controls and me don't get along. And so, anyways, here we are. And so I ended up getting pregnant while we were on our adoption journey. I did end up miscarrying, which was, that's its own grief journey. And then I got pregnant again while we were still waiting to sort of be matched with a family looking to make an adoption plan.
Mhm.
And then January, we got a call about this baby that was born, and I was 5 months pregnant, and his mom was really hoping to place him with a family who would have a sibling close in age, and we were like, well, we're pregnant, so
Yeah.
so
Wow.
she ended up choosing us, which was like, oh my gosh, just wow, such a wow. Just that's a whole other podcast. But yeah, so then we birthed Ira 5 months later. So we had Sage and Ira are 5 months apart, and they are the best of friends. They're 5 right now.
Mhm.
And then about less than 2 years later, we started our foster care certification classes. Honestly, like, we were not out here like exploding and yelling at each other. Like, that's never been our story. Just as a side
Yeah.
note, like we
Yeah.
really did family and parenting together really well.
Yeah.
And so I loved fostering. I mean, it was terrible, but I loved it too. It's that terrible sort of pain because like the state and the system and the oppression inside of the system is so terrible. So we started fostering. We had 2 other boys who were under the age of 2. So we started with a big wabam of 4 boys under the age of
Wow.
2. That was wild. And then they moved on to their now adoptive family. And then we ended up being placed with 2 more kids who were ages 8 and 4. And then we had our 2 4-year-olds. And so we had them for about a year, and they are back with their family. And my boys still, there were 2 and 3 when we had the girls, and they still talk about them to this day. Like, we
Wow.
love those girls. Yeah. And I ended up, that was our last placement, because in the middle of that placement is when we separated. And
So how old were the boys when you got separated then?
okay, Sage and Ira were 2 and
Mhm.
almost 3 when we separated. We also
Okay.
had the 2 girls plus the baby girl who we were going to adopt at the time. So
That's very
that's the total.
complicated.
It really is. I mean, it didn't like feel stupid. I mean, it just was like
Yeah.
what was happening.
Yeah.
But yes, when I explain it, it's very confusing, kind of. I could draw a picture, so I don't know. But then I ended up becoming the primary foster parent of
Mhm.
the 3 girls, and then my ex, we
Yeah.
shared Sage and Ira. However,
Okay.
I will say, yeah, the kids at that time we house shared, which essentially meant I was the primary residence on the rental agreement, but
Mhm.
my ex, would come over like a
Yeah.
couple nights a week, and then me and the girls would just like head out and let him have parenting time.
That's
So
one
the
of
kids
the
didn't, yeah,
best ways to do it. Yeah, especially when the kids are little.
yeah, it was a
Yeah.
good transition.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Now, okay. So would you share with us, because you have 3 boys, would you share with us about the man that you met shortly after you did divorce your ex-husband? What was he like? How did your life change? How did that happen?
Yes. So let's see. So we split September 1st of
Mhm.
2018, and then March 2019, I was getting a phone at the Verizon store, and this very handsome man was working. And so, whatever, got my new phone, went home. He ended up like getting my phone number from whatever. Anyways, he texted me, and then we started talking. We started dating. That's its own whole big, very untraditional
Mhm.
story mess. um, yeah, it's just a big like mess. But essentially, we got pregnant in October. We started dating. I was not in a place. I thought I was in a place to spot like my own red flags
Mhm.
and being ready to date, because I honestly had spent so much time in therapy groups, in support groups, and healing groups, and going
Mhm.
through workbooks. Like, I thought I was ready to really have boundaries and know what to look for and all these things.
Yeah.
And honestly, baby's dad was a dream on so many levels, and he presented himself as that. And
Yeah.
he will tell anybody, like, he knows that he really showed up also very unhealthy to our beginning. And so
Mhm.
he like ended up slowly kind of moving in. Like, I don't know, it was just like this slow, weird thing where like we didn't want to separate. Like we didn't want, because he lived an hour away. So, and he worked in my city. And so he
Mhm.
didn't want to, drive all the way home. And I didn't really want him to. And he was like cleaning my house and stuff. And it was nice to have a partner again. And so, and he has
Right.
2 kids who loved my kids. And so,
Yeah.
we really very quickly fell into a family life
Mhm.
that was honestly built on a lot of lies and manipulation.
Yeah.
I ended up pregnant. And then let's see, about 3 months into, well, October, November, December, yeah, 3 months into our pregnancy, I ended up breaking up with him
Mhm.
because it had gotten so toxic
Yeah.
between us. And that was its own grief journey of, wow, there was so much there that was
Yeah.
just, that was hard. That was the hard. And then that was the beginning of the pandemic. So I was
Mhm.
pregnant, moving into this tiny 300 square foot basement with my 2 4-year-olds. And the pandemic hit, and it just was really, that was a really hard time. But through and through, God has never shamed me. God has always been there with me
Mhm.
every step of this broken path. And he really continues to show me that he is so much bigger. He's so much bigger than
Yeah.
I thought, and that I can even wrap my head around.
Yeah. I hear you there. I can't even believe, like, sometimes it just blows my mind that not only does he still love me when he knows all the stuff that I do or don't do, but that he lets me join him in his work. He gives me things to do that bring me joy and things I'm passionate about. I just don't get it. He's just amazing. Thank goodness he's not a person, right?
Yes.
So here you are, you're in this position where you've moved into a really small space, you're pregnant, you've got your other 2 boys. Can you tell us about the time you're preparing to bring this baby into the family? And this is the part that really stuck out to me. And you told me that you were looking for books to read, Sage and Ira, and you couldn't find any books to read them that fit your family. So you started to make up words to match your family's reality when you read to them. And I just think that's so beautiful. It's such a pure mama heart thing to do. How did it feel that there weren't any resources that were a good fit for your family?
Oh, yeah. That was, mixed in the fact that I was postpartum by like a few weeks in this tiny basement and single. It was
Mhm.
just like, I was just so frustrated. And also throw in the fact that, I have a non biological son who is very much my son, who I've worked so hard to provide books and art in a community that like mirrors him. I'm
Mhm.
white, he's biracial.
Mhm.
And so then to now have another part of our family, just it's just like not mirrored anywhere. Like all these Daniel Tiger books, which I love Daniel Tiger and Bear and Sea
Yeah.
Bears, and I love
Yeah.
these books, but I'd be reading them and I'm just like sobbing. I'm just like quietly crying right while reading, all these hormones. But
Yeah.
the boys kept asking me, read this book about this baby, about the baby coming. They're trying to process. They're 4, and
Right.
so they kept asking me, and so I would then like, slowly change the words, and say, instead when it said like mommy and daddy prepared the nursery, I'd be like mommy and big brothers prepared the bedroom, because there was
Right.
no nursery and
Right.
things like that. And then about maybe only a few weeks after doing that, I was like, forget it. I'm writing my own children's book. So I laid in bed one night, pulled up my document, like my Google Doc app on my
Uh-huh.
phone, and just like wrote out our storyline, essentially, mostly.
Right.
And so I was like, I'm going to work in the fact that there are super twins. So they're twins, but not quite twins, they're 5 months apart. Work in the adoption part. We're going to work in that we have a baby coming that has a different
Wow.
dad. We're going to work
Yeah.
in that, we used to have other siblings too, because we were once a blended family and we did once have foster siblings. And so I
Yeah.
really tried to work in all the different ways of family. And it's very, I love this book so much.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I
It's
love
amazing. It's
it.
amazing. Now, eventually they asked you for pictures.
Yes,
So,
that's right.
yeah.
So I'd like read them this book, and then they'd be like, "Where are the pictures?" And I'm like, "Well, I just wrote it, like on my phone." And they're like, "Well, can you draw pictures?" And I'm like, "I cannot draw pictures." So then I was like, shoot, I better figure out like how much an illustrator costs, because I have published books prior to this, like memoir and a devotional. And so I was like, I know I can publish it. The illustration is going to be expensive. And so found an illustrator, love her, Marie, and we started working. She was okay with doing payment plan, and we set a date, and she did the illustrations, and here we are. We got a book with pictures.
That's
I can
awesome.
see how excited they were. They're so excited.
That's awesome. And everybody, I'm going to have some information in the show notes so that you can get a hold of this and order the book in time for Christmas. It is so amazing. And one of the things I love about it is it's not just for families that aren't traditional. It's for families that are traditional to understand there are families that aren't traditional. I think we all need to understand that. And I think kids really do want to understand what's going on. And it's so great that you came up with this resource and that it started out as just this personal thing for your family. But I think it's so valuable for everyone.
Yes, I agree. So that's one of the things I talk about often is like, this is not just for families who need represented. This is absolutely for every other family who can help start conversations with their kids about how, when they go to school, a kid has two different homes, like they can help, you can help your kid process that not everybody has the same, like not everybody is a white family that matches, like there are a lot of different things happening in this world, and I'm a huge about using children's books to start those important conversations in regards to all the big topics.
Yeah, I think it's powerful. I think it's an amazing thing to do. And I'm glad you just did it. You started a Google document and then you went and you found somebody and then you put it out there. And a lot of people would just think about it or would just keep making up the words as they read the book, but you actually made something and took it a step farther. And I think that's wonderful. Also, since we first talked, I understand you are starting a podcast of your own. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I'm so excited. Me and my friend Kate, who I have been friends with for about a decade, but we got really close after both of our divorces in the last 3 years. We just decided, I don't even know when we decided, we've been talking about it, but we really decided like a month or two ago, we're going to do this. So it's a podcast for divorcees, by divorcees. Nobody stands at the altar, says their vows to get married and thinks they're going to end up divorced. It's painful. It is. And so we just want to provide a space to be real, to be raw. We're not going to sit here and talk about our exes. We're going to actually talk about, what can you do when you're in the middle of the separation process? What are some different, we're going to talk about co-parenting and different strategies and boundaries and all sorts of things that are just really important. We're also going to dedicate time to deconstructing sort of, Christianity in the way that it has affected divorce and all those things. But yeah, it's called No Longer We. And that name came with the idea of, the disappearance of the we that happens when you get divorced. It's like you plan your whole life. We will be there. We have decided we are doing this thing. We are buying this house. We are having kids. And then suddenly it's, I have a house and I have to do all of the cleaning and I am in charge of my whole life by myself. And so it's sort of
That's
a thing
awesome.
you don't think about.
You don't until it happens. And it's something that I think a lot of people will latch on to because they're looking to feel like they're not alone. And I will also put in the show notes the Instagram account for that because right now it's not out as a podcast yet. So you can follow the Instagram account and then that'll, I would imagine, give updates to people. Okay, great. I think that's awesome. And I am already following it. So I'm looking forward to listening to the podcast when it comes out as well. I want to ask you one question that I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. If you could give any advice to someone who finds themselves in an abusive marriage or relationship like you were, what would that be?
I would sit down with them and ask them to really sit in their self, like sit with themselves, sit with God, sit
Mhm.
with nobody else, get quiet,
Yeah.
and really ask yourself, like, what do you need in order to pursue a truly healthy and free, and that might be moving into like counseling with your marriage, it might be
Mhm.
ending your marriage, it can be an array of ways that you move forward, but
Mhm.
I think we've been done a disservice to trust the spirit that God has put inside of us,
Yeah.
or we've been done disservice by not being taught to trust the spirit that God puts inside us. And when we are sitting here surveying everybody and getting everybody's opinions of
Mhm.
what to do and how to move forward with our very own precious wild life that we've been given
Mhm.
on this earth, that can just get really clouded and confusing. And so I just
Yeah.
cannot recommend we get quiet and really like
Yeah.
invite the spirit to speak to us and tell us what is the next step I can take. Is that pursuing a separation, or is that finding an amazing marriage therapist? And maybe you've
Yeah.
heard of that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I think it's really good advice. And honestly, that's good advice, even if it's not a marriage relationship, but it's just a relationship. It could be even a family or a friend that just isn't healthy, and sitting and taking the time
Yeah.
to decide, with God, what is my next step? And in some situations, it might be, to pray for that person, or draw a boundary, or whatever the case may be. And in other cases, it might mean walking away. It depends on the situation, but we need to ask God. So it's really wonderful advice.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's just important to hear that other people um, can't make a judgment in 2 seconds, and that they need to take time. I think it's very important to sit with something. I loved what
Mhm.
you said earlier about you fasted and you prayed. You didn't just get a divorce. You prayed, you thought about it, you processed what was the new
Yeah.
information. You talked to your spouse, you filtered through everything with God, and you didn't just rush to judgment. But when you knew what was right, you did it.
Yes.
you know that's,
Absolutely.
yeah. And
Yes. And then,
that's brave. It's
yeah, I was
brave
gonna say
nowadays
it
to do
takes
that.
a lot of strength to not listen to everybody else. It's very hard to do, but it's worth it because again,
Yeah,
like our life is but a vapor, you know?
it's
And
true, and it's the only one you got.
yeah, and I'm not interested anymore in living to please man. And so that has
Yeah.
been a very big lesson.
Awesome. Now, my last question is my favorite question. Anyone that listens, I ask it every time because I just love the answers so much. They're always so good. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Oh man. Amanda, that's so hard because it's like I wouldn't be here, you know. I'm like, let me think. If I could give my younger self any advice, honestly, I think I would give my younger, not that much younger self, my 23-year-old self, the advice to understand postpartum depression. I don't know. No, let's cut that out. Okay. If I could give advice to my younger self, I would say my teenage self,
Hmm.
it would be to be okay embracing the heavy parts inside of you, and know that like God is big enough to handle disappointment and anger and those heavy feelings.
Yeah.
Um, it would be the advice that just it's okay to be fully human, and
Yeah.
release the pressure. Release the pressure. You don't have to make everybody else comfortable by being happy all the time if it's fake.
Yeah.
So
It's okay to
that would
not
be,
be okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That became a thing because it's like everyone relates to it, you know.
yeah,
Um, but
yes,
but we believe this lie that everything has to be perfect. It goes back to those Norman Rockwell little family outings, like that what it looks like on the outside and being trapped within that is not a good thing. So I think that's awesome advice.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, Natalie, I'm very excited about your podcast. I'm very excited to have some people come your way as far as getting the book. I think it's an amazing resource to have. Get some, give them out as Christmas presents. It's just so unusual. And I am grateful that we got a chance to finally sit down. We both have super busy schedules and it took a while, but it was just so valuable for me. I'm so encouraged by all that you're doing. And I have another friend. I love doing this podcast because I get to share people's stories with no agenda and I get to meet these amazing people. And I don't know that I ever would have met you otherwise. So I'm grateful for knowing you. I pray for you and your family. Happy for as you're moving forward to give this next generation a healthier start. I think that's beautiful.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate your whole podcast and just the space you create. Thank you.
I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.